Welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Kiriakou, and this is the podcast that aims to help people within the recruitment industry get 1% better after every single episode. We've had such a wide variety of different guests that come on the show that talk openly about their stories, about sharing value, tools, techniques, strategies, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all within the recruitment space. And every single episode, we like to have as much fun as possible with open conversation back and forth. It's not scripted, it's uncensored. And as I mentioned, I like to have fun doing this podcast because I know that if you're going to tune into this, you want to feel like you're part of a conversation whilst also leveling up your game within the recruitment space. So if you like this podcast, please do us all a favor. Comment, like, subscribe, follow on all the platforms. It really helps drive engagement for the show. And that's enough from me. Let's get into this week's episode, and I hope you enjoy. Elaine, thank you very much for joining us on the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. For people that may or may not know who you are, it'd be lovely to have a bit of an intro to what you do at Venatrix and a little bit about your story.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for having me then, Charles. So I run Venatrix, and we are a go-to-market SaaS recruitment specialist. Our history is that we used to place lots of sales development representatives, so SDRs, into the very initial role within the go-to-market function. But we've been operating for, can you believe it, 10 years now in October. So over that time, obviously our candidates have matured and the people that we've interacted with have moved through their careers. So naturally our business has taken that evolution on as well. And we now place all different roles within the go-to-market function across the UK and East Coast US.
Nice. Love that. That's such an interesting one, isn't it? Whenever I talk to people about building a desk in recruitment and you're starting off with like the SDRs and now they've matured and grown into those senior positions, something we'll probably touch on later in the episode. But for people tuning in, topics that we're going to discuss today, quite a few that I'm quite passionate about, and I'm sure Elaine is as well. Relationships in a world of mass outreach and AI. That's one for me that I'm very passionate about talking about. How to differentiate yourself, what it takes to be a great recruiter and what it takes to be a great founder. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about personal branding and how to use that to scale your business, how to scale your brand, etc., etc. So, Elaine, let's start off with the relationships in a world of mass outreach and AI. There's such an influx at the moment of different artificial intelligence tools. You've got automated LinkedIn tools, automated email outreach tools, etc. And just before I go to your perspective, I'll tell you a very, very small anecdote that happened about 2 weeks ago. Someone sent me what I thought was a personalized message on LinkedIn and said, I know it sounds crazy, let me send you a voice note. So immediately I think, oh, well, they're sending me a voice note. So this is hyper personalized. So immediately, as someone that trains and coaches people on personalized outreach and cold calling, I was like, I'll listen to the voice note. My business is called Infinite Learning with a 1 in there. So the AI doesn't read that as infinite. So it said at INF1 finite learning. And immediately, Elaine, I just went, nah. Even if they had the best product in the world, after I heard that, I thought, personally, I think that's just so lazy. It took you could take 20 seconds to do a personalized voice note, and you decided to use AI for that. So that's my little anecdote. And I think that could potentially set this conversation up nicely. But I'll throw the microphone to you and get your thoughts on, relationships in the world of mass outreach and AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I've not had any success or any kind of hints of success of people using AI for mass outreach. And actually, interestingly, to what you just said there, one of something that I think that can affect salespeople directly is your inbox completely full of all of those generic, well, this supposedly personalized, but actually really generic AI-produced automated messages? Is your LinkedIn full of those messages as well?
Yeah.
What can happen is that when you get those messages as a decision maker in a company, you're reclassifying them into the other box. Do you do that? Yeah. So I know that some of the things that have happened to me is that people have sent me messages as salespeople being encouraged to use generic platforms and tools. Then they've sent me messages as themselves because they're using their personal LinkedIn profiles to do this AI-powered automated outreach, and they're going to the other inbox. So then have people reaching out to me, saying like, I'm actually like looking for a job or I'm considering my options, and they're not then coming up in the main LinkedIn inbox. So you're actually kind of damaging your own personal LinkedIn profile by doing that, if that's something that you're being encouraged within your company. So I'll tell you our perspective on it at Venatrix. So a couple of years ago, there was definitely this sense of feeling around about panic, wasn't there? We all
Hmm.
needed to adopt as many AI
Yeah.
tools as possible. And it was like, which one's the best and how quickly can we find that out? And let's explore them all. And like a big decision, a big conversation internally of like, if we don't do this soon, we are
Mm.
going to very, very quickly fall behind. And now the conversation that we're having internally at Venatrix about the AI platforms that we intend to adopt is completely turned on its head. And
Really?
yeah, and the main thing that we want to do is take as much time as possible because there was the initial wave of platforms that came out, and then more and more kept appearing, and it was
Mm.
just like a absolute you were literally overwhelmed by information about different platforms within rec
Mm.
tech and what they could help you do.
Mm.
So now, as part, we're part of Recruitment Entrepreneur, and
Mm-hmm.
internally within the business, we have a committee of people that are involved from all different companies, including the investors, to actually do a holistic 360 evaluation of lots of different platforms. And as it
Mm.
stands, we are yet to invest in any technology that may help us with screening candidates, for example. And we might do some things around outreach to help us, but definitely not
Mm.
automating it at scale.
Yeah.
And we haven't yet made a decision around that. The AI that we're using at the moment is focused around idea generation. So we're using things like Perplexity, we're using things like ChatGPT
Mm.
to build our approach to being creative, but
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily using it as a tool to create volume.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's quite interesting. So I met with a couple of recruitment founders earlier this week. Neither of them had recruitment experience. They both came from the property industry, and they set up a recruitment business just by themselves. They both work remotely, and they're doing okay. But one thing that they said to me on the discovery call with myself is that because everything is manual, it's very difficult, especially in the early days, to get as much out there. And because they're not utilizing a CRM, which was the first kind of red flag from my perspective, was like you need a CRM, right? Absolutely. They asked me like what I potentially use in terms of automation and what I would advise in terms of like email automation to do like the email sequencing campaigns. I've used, not as a recruiter, but as an L&D manager and as an external person, I've helped people use Sourcewell. I've had
Hmm.
the training and I've trained people using it, and the way that that platform has evolved over the years, I think it's very, very good if you use it correctly. And I
Yes.
use a platform at the minute called Canbox, which organizes my LinkedIn inbox and can automate the connection requests and follow up messages to my ICP. I personally was very against automation the years
Hmm.
ago, and there's an aspect of it that I am kind of against now. But I think depending on where you are in your journey, as if you're running a business just in general or in recruitment, do you not think it's kind of wise, especially if you're early on, to maybe have something running in the background, automation
Hmm.
wise?
Yeah, I'm not against using some platforms to help you save time. And Sourcewell is a platform that we used a couple of years ago. But it was quite interesting, really, the experience that I had with it because we obviously recruit to the SaaS market, and the SaaS
Yeah,
market had a massive boom in 2021. There were so many vacancies.
yeah,
Never thought that was going to end. The CFO of Venatrix asked me, "What will happen if people stop hiring SDRs, Elaine?" And I said, "That'll never happen." And then 12 months later, literally no
yeah,
one was hiring any SDRs. So we were very much on the front foot with trying to do business development at that time in the way that I thought would be successful in like a
mm,
down market, which is what you're talking about, a bit of a
mm,
volume-based approach. Either you're a new business or you've, suffered a bit of a hiatus of your clients. You
mm,
feel like you need to do volume.
mm,
But what happened to us then is because we were prospecting and trying to run automated campaigns into a market that wasn't buying,
mm.
we didn't get success from that.
Yeah.
And it could drive you mad because you start looking at your emails, and I'm looking at this email, I'm thinking, I've been doing this for 15 years, and
Mm,
I've like read all the guidance about like what makes a strong
yeah.
introduction of a cadence. Am I touching on the customer's pain points? Like, have I got the right open line? And
Mm.
I'm like, I teach people how to do this as well. And I'm thinking, I know it's good.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So, do you think that was just specifically just the where the market was then, where there was just a lot of noise and people weren't necessarily hiring, that there was not really a need for them to reply to the emails, or was there some sort of other reason, do you think?
I think that in the moment that you're under pressure, running a recruitment business and you're like in panic thinking like, how do I generate some more opportunities now? Because, our market just literally went silent and it was very, very difficult. And, I know that that's happening in other markets now. It's like symptomatic and it happens to different industries at different times, doesn't it? Or if you're in that new phase of like, right, the most important thing that I need to do now is make sure that every inbox, has got my logo in. I don't know if that actually is the way to win, but I think there's a place for both volume or some kind of volume, and so obviously market coverage. And we know that this is a numbers-driven industry. Like ultimately, the more outputs you do, the more results you're going to generate. But it's about the quality of that and making sure that it's not instead of trying to build deep relationships and really understand your clients from like a grassroots level about what's keeping them up at night. But Sourcewell is on our list for being re-explored now because, as you mentioned, there's lots of developments in the product, and that's one of the ones that our investors have shortlisted for us to take a look at to help give us some structure, some of those cadences, which might be one of those ones where you've got an engagement with somebody and you've sent them over something that they've requested or that would be particularly relevant to them, what's going to be a value add, and then you're just doing that kind of gentle touch and follow up, simply to try and catch them at the point where they can respond, as opposed to like something completely cold, trying to generate a first line response from somebody you've never even spoken to before.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the first time I ever got introduced to Sourcewell was January 2022, when the market was just absolutely blowing up. And I was seeing recruiters with like 3 months experience do 50K a month just by sending a Sourcewell campaign to the database, right? And then when the market started to shift, I had someone on my podcast. We're recording this now, 20th of June. So last week, I had someone on the podcast and he was saying that if your business can show the data that 80% of your vacancies comes from email marketing, automation, etc., but that recruiter doesn't have the capacity or capability, I should say, to pick up the phone, cold call someone, direct the headhunt, etc., then your business will be in a very, very bad spot. So even if that person is just pulling 80% of their jobs, they're hitting target, it's your duty as a leader, and if you're an L&D person or whatever it might be, to upskill that person to make sure that they actually have the capability to do if you can just do A, but you can't do everything up to Z, you need to do everything in between as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the key things about recruiters in this day and age as a skill set that they need to have is being adaptable. And I have run an inflexible business where we had one market offering, which was placing SDRs into SaaS companies, predominantly within the UK. And that went from being my absolute strength in 2021, when everybody wanted to hire those people in this market, to being my biggest weakness 12 months later. So, from that point onwards, I certainly learned the lesson of building flexible, robust consultants that can do all parts of the job, even though we actually operate a 180 model. My aim with everybody is to get them very quickly to the point where, come hell or high water, they've got a skill set that would allow them to generate revenue for themselves and the business for sure.
Yeah. Well, two questions, just on that, because I've heard a lot of businesses that I've been speaking to recently considering 180, and I just recently done an academy, which was the first time I've ever done a 180 academy before. It's the same concept, it's just half the modules people were in, half them weren't, etc. So I want to pick your brains a little bit on that, if you don't mind. But just going back a second, where we talk about in a world of outreach, AI, and etc., you talk about deep, meaningful relationships.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if you share this sentiment, but a lot of people, whenever I've written a post on LinkedIn about in recruitment, relationships are everything, etc., that's how I got brought up in this industry. I get flack for it, and people think that relationships is like a bit of a silly word, and this, it isn't about relationships in recruitment. It's about making deals, etc. And I'm like, I don't know, like we're not just selling like Sourcewell, for example. We're not selling you a service and then you've got a customer service person, etc. We're not selling you a phone or a laptop or anything. We're selling human beings. We're selling opportunities to people. And it's, especially in perm, right? It's such an intimate relationship you have with that person. You're speaking. When I got into L&D, Sachin from Camino Partners would call me every single night at like 7, 8, 9 p.m. to prep me for my interview the next day, to get interview feedback, make sure I was happy. It's so intimate. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just curious, firstly, to see what your opinion is about why I might get some flack about relationships in recruitment.
Well, probably because people don't necessarily understand that there is an authentic driver behind it, and for some people there isn't. And we know, I do think that it has changed more recently, though, that there isn't really the space for individuals who are working in recruitment with only the motivation to make money out of it. It is a hard job. It is a hard job, but you know
Yeah.
what? I love it. And
Yeah.
I'm the type of person, I can't really sit still for very long, and I don't like watching the telly because I feel like it doesn't capture my imagination. I always like thinking about the next thing. But one thing that's been very consistent for me for the last 20 years is my interest in recruitment, because every time I do engage with a new client or a new candidate, even though I may be offering the same service, it is a different set of challenges. It's a new circumstance. It's somebody new to learn about. So if you feel passionate about it, then those relationships are coming from an authentic place.
Yeah.
But obviously, there are people in the industry who perhaps make candidates and clients feel like it's just a transaction that they're looking to have, and they think that they're just trying to dress that up with the word relationships. But
Yeah.
it's funny you should mention about like the origin of vacancies within your business, or maybe of new candidates. And I think this kind of ties into the relationship point as well, is that 40% of our vacancies or our new business clients come from recommendation and referral.
Wow, that's a
So
good number.
yeah, so not from inboxing, not from automation.
Yeah.
It's through people who've enjoyed the service of working with us, who want to recommend other people who should be doing the same in their investment portfolios or new businesses that they join, or whatever that might be. 50% of our candidate placements come from recommendation or referral.
Wow.
So that is also why the relationship piece is so important, because it's actually the door opener to way more new business.
And what do you guys specifically do, if anything, about like really solidifying that relationship? Because you talked a little bit there about not being overly transactional, and that's why you guys get a lot of referrals, et cetera, et cetera. But I've worked in businesses before where you weren't allowed to send a candidate out unless you've met them. And the minimum expectation was to jump on a team, because we did a lot of international recruitment. You can't just go to Brussels to meet a candidate for coffee. Like, a lot of candidate meetings, and really like a true deep understanding of their needs and their reasons for leaving. Not just, oh yeah, Elaine wants more money, or she's looking to leave because her boss is a bit of a dick. It's like, why is that? And really truly understanding that person and keeping close to them. But what do you guys do to really solidify that relationship with candidates and clients that enables you to get those referrals?
Yeah, so I think there's one uniqueness to our business, which is that it has been driven historically by placing people into like a first or second role. So for those candidates, it's very much like an eye-opening education piece where they suddenly have access to all of this information and insight about how to get a job that they otherwise wouldn't have had.
Right.
And for that, in return for that, they feel like, wow, you gave me this opportunity. You saw my potential. You picked me from obscurity, and you put me on track to be earning six figures at some point in my lifetime by joining an amazing SaaS company. So thank you very much, Venatrix. I'll happily recommend you. And then in terms of working with more senior candidates, it is about like actually getting to know them as a person. And the kind of structure of our business is our 180 team are the consultants who are interviewing and identifying potential SDRs for our clients, most of all. So that's the kind of entry point into a career at Venatrix. And then I have a go-to-market team of people who are the individuals working with more senior candidates. So they're building relationships with people who know the industry and probably know many recruiters. And we don't have that unique kind of, this is your first job and we're going to teach you how to get a job relationship with them. So that's all in the hiring. That's about like who we have selected to join that go-to-market team. Are they individuals who are genuinely curious about people and have the right intentions when they're looking to make placements, and then that naturally comes across in the call?
Yeah, I really like that, because I think the natural intention and actual curiosity and willingness to learn about that person and that market is absolutely huge. I can't remember who it was I spoke to recently about this, but we spoke a lot about what happens if you join a business if you're not really actually interested about the market, if you're not really interested about the types of candidates you're speaking to. Now, I did healthcare and medical technology, both sectors I was so passionate about and I loved. And when I was dealing with salespeople that were selling medical devices, that was like a double whammy for me because I'm in sales, right? So I was so passionate about that. So it came across on the phone when I was asking them, like, tell me about the technology that you're selling and how does that look? What's the sales cycle? How long does it take? How much does that cost, etc. And people could tell I was genuinely interested. Now, I believe you can kind of almost fake it a little bit. Like, you know, I work with some recruiters that work in a space that isn't as sexy. We talk about AI automation. Like, I know some people that work in that space and they're dealing with like developers that sat at home coding all day and they're not exactly passionate about it themselves too much. But yeah, that'll be a question to you then. I mean, what do you do if someone isn't so passionate about the market?
I think there's probably always an angle. So, you know, with every market has its nuances, doesn't it? And I think it's probably, you know, your job maybe as the recruiter to find the interesting points about what are the difficulties in terms of companies trying to get hold of that talent and what is talent saying back to those companies who are trying to hire them. And once you kind of like knock onto that point that does interest you, then that's kind of your angle.
That's a wicked bit of advice.
Yeah, because, you know, back to kind of the relationship piece overall, all of us, from an external perspective, on the tin, do the same thing, which is that we place candidates with companies. And the differentiator really are two parts. So one of them is in the service. So as we were just talking about, like being genuinely interested, but also providing results. And the other one is in the engagement. So that's ultimately how you win and retain clients, isn't it? And those relationships by delivering on what it is they said you were going to do. And in the first instance, engaging people into your atmosphere that they want to be, you know, start conversations with you. So if you were somebody in a market where you were thinking, my goodness me, this is boring, then like digging deep to find the angle of what is the interesting point of like where companies struggle and what candidates' demands are, then gives you that talking point that allows you to do the engagement of new prospects in your market in the first place.
Yeah. Just a quick one from me, guys. I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. But as you probably know, the way that I fund this podcast is through my coaching business. So just a little bit of information around that because you or someone that you might know might find some value in this. But I work with recruitment agencies, recruitment businesses within, you know, a range of 1 to 100 heads that are looking to scale, grow, and ultimately want to upskill both founder level, recruiter level, and everything in between. And I offer a wide variety of different services from one-to-one coaching, group coaching, training academies, business development training, creating company handbooks, and I'm looking to do a lot more webinars and I'm looking to add as much value as I possibly can. But in order for me to keep doing this podcast, I need to make a living, I need to pay my mortgage, and I can only do that through my coaching business. It's really difficult doing it by yourself, but I love doing it and I add a lot of value to recruiters and recruitment businesses. So if that sounds like something that you'd potentially be interested in, if you're someone that's passionate about personal and professional development, my details are below with this podcast. That's enough from me. Let's get into the rest of this week's episode.
Get in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's really solid advice, to be fair, because I work with some people that you can just tell they're not overly passionate about the market they work in, but understanding the angle and reframing it in your head is absolute power. Before I move on quickly to the next part, I did mention about the you guys run a 180 model.
Yes.
I've always wanted, when I was a recruiter, the least favorite part of my job was doing a Boolean search on the CRM or, you know, going on LinkedIn, creating a project. I always used to get flack from my boss, be like, let me see your LinkedIn project. And I'm just like, especially back then before, like, because I've got ADHD, I had my official diagnosis a few years back. You said about not being able to sit still. I'm currently stood up because I physically cannot sit down for long periods of time, right? It's brutal. So I always used to say, like, I want a delivery consultant. I want a resourcer to find me the people for me. But a lot of businesses are afraid, Elaine, of doing that because you mentioned about your market kind of going silent for about a year. A lot of companies that I've spoken to that have thought about it have said, well, what happens if the market stops? What are we going to do with the delivery guys? I've got my own sort of methodology, but seeing as you've actually been doing this and it sounds like you've been really successful with it, it'd be interesting to hear kind of maybe the trials and tribulations of doing that 180 model for people that might be considering doing it.
Yeah. So I think the definite advantages that we experience for the type of roles that we place in the 180 model, which is the very junior roles that we place people into, is that the candidates that we are trying to engage, it's very difficult to tell from their CV or background if they're actually going to be a fit. because they don't necessarily have any experience of doing the job. So what the 180 model allows us to do there is it allows consultants to spend all of their time assessing candidates in a way beyond their CV or digital or a piece of paper, whatever it may be, and they can have an actual conversation with candidates all day long. So one, that creates a volume of outreach, and two, it creates like consistent benchmarking of what actually good looks like, because all day they're speaking to the same type of profile of candidates. So we're able to kind of gauge at different times what is standout talent versus candidates that we shouldn't be representing to our clients because they're not standout talent in the market. Obviously, the difficulties of that is, you do leave yourself in a vulnerable position if the industry changes and if there is less demand in your market, because obviously if you've got jobs to fill, you don't need a 180 team of consultants to do so. So I think the answer to that is, no matter what stage your 180 consultants are at, whether they are new in the business, which it's kind of the entry point to a career in Venatrix, and we would expect somebody to do that job for 2 years, perhaps before moving into something else. Starting to give those individuals the mindset of being a go-to-market consultant working in a 360 role, so that they never lose sight of the commercial aspect to the business. So ultimately, they don't become a resourcer and they don't become somebody who simply fills jobs. They do become a market expert through gaining the knowledge from asking intelligent questions to candidates that's going to help build the right instincts for them in the future, or should they need to be called on. So all the typical recruiter stuff in terms of gathering leads, understanding which ones are the key target companies, understanding what's going on in the market, what's the candidate's perception of what good companies would be, and starting that instinct early so that people, those team members are not fearing BD or fearing speaking to clients. So exposing them to clients as well, getting them involved in client meetings. But when it works in the right market, it works really well, because you get that volume and you get that consistency.
Well, I think you've kind of answered the question I was going to ask you around the concern a lot of people have if they're thinking about doing 180 is, if the market starts to quieten down a little bit and you have a team of people that aren't effective at hunting business, what do you do then? My answer to that to companies that asked me about it was, you don't just have your delivery team source for jobs. In my opinion, you don't just have them just not blindly, but like with the blinkers on, just sourcing for this one SDR role in London. Get them to build lists of candidates that are great to take to market, to use for the business development team to have product to take to their clients. Hunt for leads, CV strips, every single CV that you're getting, strip it for data, new businesses, new contacts. And like you said, if they're also getting involved in client meetings and can offer a different perspective to the business development manager or whatever you want to call them, to then say, look, I've spoken to in the last week X amount of candidates and they're saying this, like having those two perspectives on a client meeting is just, in my opinion, it's power. I mean, I had a guy that wasn't a delivery. He was 360, but the first year working with me, he hated business development. He hated it, but he was so good at finding candidates, so good at getting the commitment from them, closing them. And he had the record, and I've said this on the podcast tons, but and he might hate me for saying this, but he had the record for the most amount of candidates placed on lower salary than what they were on. That's a fucking skill. Like, that is a skill. But like, he was so good at finding the true need of the candidate and understanding why they're looking to leave that he could close them on a much lower salary. Don't get me wrong. Like, sometimes he would get them to accept 30, but then get them an offer of 50, and they absolutely loved him for it. But yeah, I personally, I think that the 180 model, if it's done right, and it sounds like you guys are doing it really, really well, I think it's power, especially for someone like me that really hates the delivery side.
Yeah, I think, like you say, don't want to create that fear about business development though. But I genuinely believe anybody can do business development.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. If you could speak to a candidate and you can get somebody to change the course of their life, make a decision that affects their every single day on a personal level, there's no reason why you can't speak to companies and successfully convince them to use your service. And also the dynamics are the same. But sometimes business development to a 180 consultant who's never done it before, I could see why they would be fearful of it, because all of a sudden it's like on another level, professional, or whatever it may feel like. But I think that with the right training and the right understanding of what it is that you're trying to achieve, less pressure on feeling like I've got to get a deal on this phone call, and you open it with the same that you would as a conversation with a candidate. Just get curious about them.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're speaking my language. Whenever I do business development training with people that are going into BD or new to recruitment, I always just say, like, what's the difference? We'll use your analogy, right? What's the difference between speaking to an SDR and a sales director of a SaaS business? And most people go like, oh, the sales director has more responsibility. I'm like, let's just take a stop for a second. Where do they go to, and this is a bit crass, but where do they go to take a piss and a shit? And everyone in the training room will always look at me and go, what the fuck? And the reason why I say that is because one of my first ever clients invited me to an exhibition, and he could see I was 23. He could see I was visibly anxious. I had my little mini iPad mini to do my little pitch deck to everyone at the exhibition, and I was shaking. And it was so sweet. He didn't have to do this. He was so sweet. He just put his arm around me and went like, look around the room. They're just human beings. And I was like, right, yeah, no, I get that. But he's a VP, he's a CEO, etc. And he went, Charles, see that toilet over there, the sign there? Everyone in here, also like you, uses the toilet to go for a piss and a shit. And he tapped me hard on the back and went, crack on. And then he just cracked on with his conversation with the client. And I just remember as soon as he said that, it was like that. Sometimes you get these light bulb moments in life. And my anxiety didn't just immediately disappear, but I just thought, you know what? Fuck it. Like, let's just have conversations. And I didn't get any deals or no positives from any of the clients that day. I got brutally rejected by all 20 businesses in the room. But it was that thing I needed, because before I wasn't going to do the pitches before because I was so nervous of speaking to these people. But I got the experience, finessed the sales pitch, and literally about 2 months later, that same iPad mini with the pitch deck on it, we'd done a European sales team build for a company called Laborie, and it was a 250 grand account. So I needed to go through the rejection and stuff. And the reason why I mentioned that is a couple of different things. Is that what you said about anyone can do BD? I think the only reason why I think not everyone can necessarily do it is if they're not willing to shift their mindset. Because with BD, I think I know you get a lot more rejection than what you would with a candidate, because a candidate is a free service. It's like, go on, I'll have a chat. Hiring managers get bombarded by recruiters. Why the fuck do I want to work with you? If you are not willing to shift your mindset and have the resiliency and the grit and the perseverance to get through the shit, my language, that's why I think some people just probably not cut out for it.
What I would say to those people is work on the intel that you have. So, for example, if you go and if you're worried about being knocked back time after time after time, don't make a list of people that you're going to call and they're all going to knock you back, basically. If you work in an organization, obviously my company has 10 years now depth of speaking to people and relationships. So when go-to-market consultants join our team, okay, they don't quite have, I'm not saying it's easy to do this. It's not like, they walk in and say, oh, I know that there's 10 companies I can call where I've got like a direct reference of why they're going to be talking to me. But actually think about who you're going to call and why. And maybe it's because they are linked to a company that you've worked with previously. They're linked to a decision maker that you have interacted with. There's a very strong case as to why you would be getting in touch with that company based upon a company that you've just worked with. Because the time on the phone will be elongated by saying something that's actually of value instead of like trying to do a cold pitch introduction, because I can understand why that's disheartening. I don't think that anybody can really do that anymore. Certainly in the early days of my sales career, I was very much like calling people, just get on the phone, call, big list, indiscriminate, just big hodgepodge of like all different companies that I thought might be hiring at some time. And don't get me wrong, I did a high volume of cold calls to them. I was very successful in business development and still am. But it's very hard to do that now because less people pick up the phone, the work from home thing, people have been hammered, etc., etc. So it's about actually strategically thinking who you are calling and why. It's the same as the automation piece of dropping loads of emails to people. If it has no relevance to the person you're speaking to, then you probably won't have a great conversation with them.
100%. I think it comes down to that personalization and differentiating yourself to other recruiters, right? So this might make you laugh. I did a call coaching session with a trainee recruiter. He's got some sales experience, but this is his first job in recruitment. Picked up the phone and I said, look, I'm going to let you do your phone call. We kind of done a little bit of prep beforehand, but I said, I want to just see how you do it, and then we'll listen back to it after. He did the call, listened back to it. The hiring manager said like 3 times, mate, I get bombarded by recruiters dozens of times a day. Just send me an email. And the consultant was like, yeah, I don't want to bother you, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, you are. You don't really have anything to offer. We don't really want to work with recruiters. Just go away. It was the most textbook, classic smokescreen objection. And unfortunately, the recruiter was in a position where he was like, I don't really know how to overcome this. And he kind of felt like the client was on the pedestal and didn't want to make them feel like he's bothering them, et cetera, et cetera. And from my perspective, when I listened back to that, I was just like, it just sounded so fucking generic. It sounded so generic. Every other recruiter, hi, Elaine, I work for X recruitment business. Are you currently hiring at the moment? We have a list of fantastic candidates. Everyone fucking says that. It's boring and it doesn't fucking work anymore. You got to stand out. One way of standing out, sure, is actually fucking picking up the phone, because not many recruiters do that.
Yeah.
They sit there and they wait for the client to come back to them on an email, which in my eyes, when I got into recruitment, if I didn't call someone the minute I got the lead, or if a candidate has gone on the job boards, my manager would scream at me and say, your competitor is going to win before you. And I've had many instances where I've lost out because a competitor of mine has got there before me due to my stupid, lazy, like immature brain, right? So that really fucks me off now when I see people not pick up the phone sooner. But I'll throw it across to you then. In terms of like you mentioned obviously about the value, that the how, why you're going to call, etc. But
yeah.
But from a recruiter standpoint, what can they do to really differentiate themselves?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And you're very right. If you're getting an email objection, the problem is, I mean, yes, learn how to overcome the email objection, but actually go back to the beginning of the call, because if you were saying something that was relevant to them, you probably wouldn't end up in that email objection. So we introduce ourselves very briefly. So I would simply say, this is Elaine Tyler calling from Venatrix. That's it. And then the reason for don't you say what Venatrix do? Reason for the call, Charles, is that I have been working with lots of founders of fintech companies. So directly naming them and the job that they do in the industry. Or like you can get more specific than that. Fintech's quite broad. You might say payments companies, whatever. And they're feeling very frustrated because they're looking to grow their teams and take advantage of the uptick in the economy in 2025. But in doing so, they're not able to find the right candidates who can help them do this. So they're meeting people who either flatter to deceive on their CV, and when they sit down to interview them, they find they're wasting their time because those candidates missed target in previous years and they have no real body of success. Or when they do meet somebody that they would like to hire, that candidate has so many processes underway that the actual likelihood of them hiring that person is very low. So how far do these challenges resonate with you?
Damn. I like that.
So yeah, because basically it's not about Venatrix, it's all about them. It's calling out exactly what it is that they do in their industry. And realistically, probably anybody who's hiring into a sales go-to-market function has met candidates who haven't hit target, don't have a compelling story, or had a candidate that's gone away recently, somebody they would like to have hired and they weren't able to because the market is competitive again. So if you do that, because there's no intro, nobody then says, well, thanks very much, Elaine, send me an email to that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the likelihood is that if those issues actually resonate with them, then they'll say so. I guess the main sort of smoke screen objection you might get is, no, we're fine. We don't really ever have that issue. If that was the case, what would your response be to that?
I would say, obviously, appreciate I've called you out the blue. Is that a brush off? And how do you, and if so, like, what's your secret sauce? Because like I say, every other fintech founder I've been speaking to has had one of those problems at some point.
Oh, I like that. So you basically just calling them out, like just basically saying like, is that because I said this to someone the other day about it was a contract recruiter and they called someone in construction and they basically tried to fob him off and he got flustered. He got off the phone and was like, I didn't know what to say. And it's difficult when you're call coaching someone live, because I know when I've done phone calls, my manager's been on the other headphone, say this, and you're like, you just get really overwhelmed. You're trying to listen to the client and you're like, But when he got off the phone, I said, that's a polite and professional fuck off. That's what it is. So why don't you just mirror that? And depending on what your market is like, again, if you're in the construction space where they are quite, geezerish and whatnot, then just say like, is that just your way of just telling me to bugger off? What you said, is that like a brush off? I like that. I think more people should just call people out on it.
Yeah, and we do call salespeople, so sales leaders and founders of companies, so they appreciate that like directness, and they're like, well, yeah, okay, you kind of got me. And I think obviously the confidence to do that comes from the fact that we've got so many stories of success of how we have spoken to companies who have brushed us off in the first instance, who then gone on to recruit loads of people for. And that, the reality is we've got such a depth of experience as a company, and me obviously as an individual. There's probably no conversation that I couldn't add a bit of value to. And worst case scenario, I can just share some insights with them and move on, find out a bit about their business, be curious. That was an interesting conversation. Found out they're suffering from this, and share some insights. And that's it. You don't have to sell to everybody. Realistically, to be a successful recruiter, how many clients do you actually need? 50?
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, guys. If you like short form content and want to see clips of prior episodes that are about to launch, or episodes that have just recently launched, you can see so many clips on my TikTok. It will be coming up on the screen right now. It's just charles.kiriakou on TikTok, and I upload 30 to 90-second clips at least 5 times a week. So if you see a clip on there and you go, actually, do you know what, that sounds like a wicked episode, you can just simply go on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube to see that episode and then watch the full episode. But yeah, I'm trying to upload a lot more on TikTok, so if you could give me a little follow over there and just check out the clips and give me some feedback, that'd be hugely appreciated. And just one more thing as well, if you're getting this far into the episode and you haven't liked or you haven't followed or subscribed or anything like that, you're going to miss out on so many good episodes. We have so many good guests that have already come on, that are coming on, so please make sure you're following, subscribed, etc. Oh, and finally, I have a newsletter that it comes out every single month so you don't miss any of the episodes. So follow on all those areas, and let's get into the rest of the episode. Well, what you just said there as well is something I've always tried to teach people, is that you have to reframe the outcome of the conversation. Because if you're going into every single conversation with someone with the intent to pull a new job, get a new client on, or get some business or do a deal, you're going to set yourself up for a lot of anxiety and largely just self-doubt, failure, etc. You're not going to win a client on the first call 9 times out of 10. So I always used to say, and I do this in training now, that every single call, if you can go into that call with the intention that you want to gather 3 crucial bits of information, whether that's information about them personally, information about their team or their company, how they recruit, etc. I mean, that just off the top of my head, there's 4 little bits of info. If you can get a bit of info about, where that personal information, how many people are in their team, what their company growth plans are, how they recruit, whether they use agencies or not, that's a fucking decent call. Do you know what I mean? That's a decent call.
And they would 100% remember you when you call back.
Which goes back to our initial point about differentiating ourselves, right? Because that's one thing that I hear a lot from founders is, at the end of that call, do you think that person would remember you? Because if not, in a sea of so many, and I'm assuming your market's quite competitive, right? There's so many fucking recruiters trying to do the same type of thing. How do you actually stand out from people? How do you get them to remember you, right?
Yeah, I actually did something interesting the other day. One of my team brought to me an opportunity that they were just like, don't know how to deal with this, Elaine. It was a company seed round funded insurtech platform, and they were looking at making their first initial hires. So they'd had a conversation that was it was an inbound lead, and they'd had a conversation with one of the consultants about hiring these candidates. And she was then on holiday for the next follow-up call, so I took it. And I was speaking to the founder of this business, and he was kind of asking me about hiring these candidates. And I thought, this is not going to work if he hires these people. The company's not ready, and he hasn't yet really understood what it would be like to manage these people, delving into his experience of having managed SDRs before, because they're not an easy group of people to manage, because you need to give them lots and lots of guidance. So, with him, I just told him it probably isn't quite the right time. And instead I put him in touch with people from my network. So some go-to-market advisors, and then he's connected with them. And I know he's had a conversation with him, spoken to him since. And then he said, obviously, when I am recruited, I'm going to use you, because I like the approach in terms of you not just transactionally trying to take my money, because, I know, I feel like that would have been a waste of everybody's time to pursue those vacancies. But again, that comes from having lots of confidence, doesn't it? Of knowing which opportunity is going to be right.
Exactly. And experience as well, right? You've obviously been doing it a very long time. What about for people either working for you or just working in recruitment in general that maybe have only been doing the job sub 1 year, that might not necessarily be as knowledgeable about the pains of their clients, as knowledgeable about what particular market insights to offer, or understanding whether that's the right opportunity or not? What advice would you give to those people?
Would they take that job? Do you know what I mean? Like it just put themselves in the candidate's shoes, like empathy first, isn't it?
Mm.
If you were, for me, I had a lot of empathy with that founder because I thought there's so many lessons that I've learned from my business live in action at the time that I wish people could have told me before because they probably
Mm.
knew. So yeah, that's what I would say. Just, always put yourself in that person's shoes. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you were that candidate, would you take that job? And
Mm.
if you wouldn't, then you shouldn't be advising that person to do it.
Yeah, and broadly as well, like for maybe like a sub 1 year recruiter that maybe doesn't necessarily know, like just generally speaking, like the market, like the client, the issues the clients have, for example, what potential market insights? Because whenever I work with slightly junior people in businesses that
Yeah.
where they've not really had a lot of training and they're still kind of getting to grips with their market, they're 6 months in, and I'm a similar approach to you. Like when I first started doing this podcast, a few people talked me through their openers that was quite similar to yours. And whenever I go through that with people, Elaine, they say, "Well, I don't really know what the challenges are of my hiring managers," and I kind of like figuratively pull my hair out, like, "How do you're not asking about these things? Like, what are we doing on these calls? Are you simply just calling people and saying, 'Are you hiring?' No, all right, I'll call you in 6 months." That's kind of what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've got a million questions that they could obviously ask a hiring manager on a call about like what they're currently doing, how
Mm,
successful it is, how they came to that conclusion. And, obviously you're going to learn information there. But it's very difficult, I think, that when you're a new recruiter, that you don't realize that not everybody does know everything about recruiting.
mm,
And not everybody, sometimes when I have new people join my team, they think, well, how can I advise this person about how to get a job as an SDR? So, well, you've already got way more experience than them around the job market because they've never had
yeah,
a job before.
yeah,
So, looking retrospectively at other success stories within the business and starting to understand not necessarily the market element, but the recruitment element.
mm,
So, for the last 3 deals that were done, how did they come about? How many candidates did that company need to meet? What were the reasons those candidates were successful or not? And even then, you would have some intel to take into a next conversation, wouldn't you?
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. I think it all just boils down to questioning. To be honest,
Yeah.
I think if you can get really, really good at asking great, open, thought-provoking questions, then largely you'll be quite okay in this job. Because I think
Hmm.
every aspect of the cycle of recruitment involves questioning, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So before we move on to the last thing, because I'm conscious of time and I want to talk a little bit about the personal branding aspect of things. We talked a little bit
Yes.
about differentiating yourself and what it takes to be a great recruiter.
Hmm.
Just want to take a couple of moments to talk about what you think it takes to be a great founder. Like you've been running your business now for over 10 years, right?
Yeah, well, just
Yeah.
coming up to just coming up
Or
to 10
just
years.
coming up to
Yeah.
10 years, right? So I speak predominantly to a lot of people that have recently set up or have been a founder for a few years. So they've got a small to
Hmm.
medium sized business. And in the last few years or so, some people have made, I think, you need to make mistakes and stuff in order to learn and stuff like that. But where the markets have been so unpredictable in the last 3 years or so, I'm seeing a lot of shifts in the industry in regards to quite a few things. But I just want to pass the mic over to you, Elaine, and just kind of
Hmm.
talk about what you think it takes to be like a great founder of a recruitment firm.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, my journey, it's been quite a journey because I started my
Mm,
company when I was 29, and I know it's nothing to do with age. Anyone could be a founder at any age. But
mm,
for me, I definitely think I've like matured into my leadership during that last 10
mhm,
years. Um, One of the things that I wish I had spent like more time on, even though I felt like I did have it, is the clarity of vision.
mm,
So, because you're leading people and you need to have it very clear in your mind of where that is going. And that sounds very
mm,
simple. I wrote it down on the first day that I opened Venatrix, but I didn't really have the actual tools to put it into action and execute it.
mm.
It also has changed over time because initially it was very focused around being an SDR recruitment business,
Sure.
whereas now it is about being a go-to-market recruitment organization, UK, East Coast US, around like
Mhm,
5 key areas within the technology industry. So prop tech, e-commerce, martech, cybersecurity, and fintech.
mhm,
And actually having the actually being able to explain to the rest of the team how that's going to grow and take shape and what might be the twists and turns along that journey. Of course, you can't necessarily be pinned to some rigid model, but
mm,
being able to actually explain that is key because
mm.
otherwise people don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're working towards, they don't know what the opportunity is, and I think that can be very symptomatic of of smaller recruitment firms and people starting out.
Mm.
I think you've got to have a lot of patience, because things will take longer than you expect, and you're not necessarily going to get the results that you want day one. And actually, the evolution of my business from being an SDR only recruitment business to now being what it is, that I can credibly say we do all those things now.
Mm.
It's nudging the nose of the ship in the right direction a little bit every day. And I think you need to have that long-term strategic view of, again, like not feeling governed by generating money for this month, although of course you have to do that, but also thinking about, how am I laying the foundations for the vision that I want to build? Like when we've been doing business development today, was that supporting me being the number one provider to companies within those sectors of the tech industry I mentioned for all of their go-to-market roles? Because if it wasn't, why are we doing it? And then that can act as your like compass on your longer term strategic view.
Mm. So when you said about having like a clear vision, I'm curious to know that when you first set up, you mentioned that perhaps the vision wasn't as clear and you didn't have like the tools necessarily to really execute it. What did it look like back then, and how has it become different in that respect?
Yeah, like there was a vision, but it wasn't necessarily like, it didn't have a strategy, and
Mm.
I wasn't necessarily executing it, because my understanding about not being a transactional founder and recruiter comes from being one. So when I first started Venatrix, it was all like, right, new business, volume, like you mentioned about the people that you're advising, like we've talked about today, like new business, we'll call everybody, we'll win it, we'll win a company, and then we play some people with them, and then we ring the next one.
Yeah.
And,
Classic.
yeah, and we tell you what, we're really good at it. So we generated lots of new business relationships from doing that. And then we did the deliverables, a service piece that I mentioned earlier. We were good at getting the results.
Mm.
But it's like a leaky bucket doing that, because you're
Yeah.
not really tracking your relationships. You don't really know what the pain points of those companies are. When the market changes, you're nowhere at the table. You're
Yeah.
not working with them as a partner. You're not advising them, and
Mm.
ultimately they're not very sticky relationships.
Mm.
So it wasn't strategic, because it was just kind of like, be good at it, be the best SDR recruiter.
Yeah.
Whereas now the vision is very much more around, working with key companies, deep relationships with a candidate pool that we fully
Yeah.
understand, and sectors within the technology industry that we, again, have a strong understanding of what their challenges might be, specifically with regards to
Mm.
recruiting. Then that leads into all of the other things that I was talking about before about the engagement. So then how, when we're trying to engage more clients in those sectors, we've got very clear messaging that resonates with them, and we can talk to their specific pain points. And then you bring them in, you deliver the service,
Yeah.
and then it grows from there. So that's
Mm.
in kind of a very potted version of like what the strategy is.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I kind of wanted to dig a little bit into that, since doing this podcast, selfishly, like I have people on because I want to learn about business and want to learn about the recruitment industry and get different perspectives, and hopefully, like people listen back to this, see that I'm learning, and then maybe they pick a few things up. But it really resonated with me because when I set my business up a year and a half ago, obviously I got made redundant for my last role. As soon as I got made redundant, I set up Charles Kiriakou Coaching. Obviously, I've rebranded now, but when I first set up and I got asked by someone like, what do you want to be? Like, what does this want to look like? And I was kind of stuck. I was like, well, I've always wanted to run my own thing because I've unfortunately worked for some not so nice people. Recruitment's full of those. And I just, want to do coaching and I want to do it my way. I don't want someone to say, that's not how I want to do it. It's my business. I just want to do it my way. But I really struggled to identify what was the actual like problem I was solving. What was the actual service? Where do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to be looked at? Not like, because I don't really care too much about like the opinion of others, but what's my reputation? Like what do I actually do? And it took, to be honest, it took me at least a year for me to start really like scratching my head and going, okay, I think this is kind of the problem I solve. I think this is kind of the offering. And only in the last 3 months, to be quite honest, I've actually gone like, bang, that's kind of what it is. There's actually been a bit of a strategy behind it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That like light bulb moment. And before that, you're like struggling. So why can I not articulate like what it is I'm doing, and like for who and why they'd buy it? And like I said earlier, from the outside perspective, on the tin, it looks like we all do the same. And then I couldn't even like manage to articulate that. But then all of a sudden you kind of like get to the point where it feels natural. It's in that rhythm. You've identified like the heat maps of your success. You start to scale that, and then you're like, right, that is how this comes together as a company with real purpose and meaning.
100%. And two things that I think might make you laugh, seeing off what you said before. When people would ask me like, why should we work with you? We've met a bunch of other trainers. I'm just fucking good. Like I'm fucking good. I know I'm good. I've got loads of energy. I've got loads of passion. But when you're coaching people, Charles, what does that actually do? And I'm like, it's a really good question. Like I know there's successes, but like how the fuck do I articulate this? And then I got a business coach about 4 months ago now. And he said, how many testimonials or recommendations have you got on LinkedIn? And I said, I've got like nearly 70, but a lot of them are from the sales reps that I've placed, and a few from my L&D days. It's like, how many times are you snipping those, putting them in your emails and putting them on your brochures and stuff? I was like, not too much, to be fair, because I just feel a bit, and he was like, mate, that's mental to me. Also, next time you get a testimonial, get them to put facts, figures, and like how like the actual numbers and stuff like that, so that next time you speak to a business owner, you can say, they had a similar issue, here's what I did, this is what they said. Lo and behold, people are coming back and going, so what does coaching do? Don't take it from me, take it from this person here. This is what I've done. Oh yeah, that sounds great, come on in. It's like, I wish I fucking knew this ages ago.
The proof point of trying to present a conceptual service to a potential buyer. But top tip, lay it out in the initial conversations with the people that you're prospecting to and selling to, that is something that you want to get from them. Could use it as a negotiation piece potentially. Will you be a testimonial for me? Will you provide the facts and figures of what this does before you even agree the deal with them? So it's not retrospective and it's already always part of the service, or use it as like a feedback loop as well. Say, like part of my service is that I will be asking specifically for these figures so that we can review them together.
Decent. Okay, yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to do. But to tell you what, a lot of the startups that I work with, I need to speak to Derry and get some sort of agreement, because honestly, every single business I'm like, just fucking work with one up. Because so many businesses they don't track their data, so I might have to have a chat with them, to be fair. But
I've got one up.
It's good. I've used it. I'll make you laugh. I met Derry at Hisham's rebrand event, and I didn't know who he was. And he said, "Oh, have you ever used OneUp before?" And I said, "I used it back in 2016. I thought it was a heap of shit." And he looked at me and went, "Really?" And I was like, "Well, what else have you used?" I was like, "I used North Star. That was the worst thing in the world." It's like Cube 19 was the best. And I was like, "Sorry, I didn't catch your name." He was like, "I'm Derry. I'm the CEO of OneUp." Right, okay. And then, to be fair, he was just like, I rate that. And he was like, and in fairness, in 2016 we were shit, but we're a lot better now. And I was like, I know. But anyway, cool. Last thing, because I know that you got to shoot in a second, but it'd be good to get, even if it is just a couple of bullet points before we go on to our last question. But personal branding, scaling your business using your brand. You obviously do a fair amount on LinkedIn. People that work within your business, you've allowed them to be quite autonomous with posting on LinkedIn and stuff. I've worked in businesses that are very anti LinkedIn, very anti personal branding. It needs to come through the company page and stuff. But it'd be just good to get a couple of little pointers from you as someone that's had some success with this, on if a recruiter or a business is looking to, enhance their personal brand, kind of some tips around that would be really, really useful.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, you need to understand the motivation of why you're doing it. Because, if people are thinking, if people don't have the clear reason to do it, then obviously they're not going to do it consistently. So for me, the reason is that it is the opportunity to gain referrals from people who don't even know you, because you are seen as the industry as an expert in that industry or in that in that part of recruitment, and other people see your content, and even though they don't know you, when somebody says, "I have a need for X," they say, "Well, what about Elaine from Venatrix then?" And they've never even spoken to you. So that's the driver behind it. So then when you understand that it's like a at scale recruitment tool with people, new business tool with people that you've never spoken to before, that's what's going to give you the motivation to do it.
I love that. Just on that, because I know we've got to wrap up in a second. I spoke to, I'm meeting him as well, actually. So one of my clients, his dad owns a big recruitment business. And his whole perspective was that if you're posting a selfie of you eating an ice cream because it's a hot day, what's the fucking point? And I caveated to that. And I said, look, I get that your perspective as a business owner is that your LinkedIn post should show an immediate return on investment, but that's almost like the conversation you and I had, Elaine, about calling a client and immediately thinking, I have to book a meeting now, I have to get a job on now.
Yeah.
My whole perspective is that the amount of times I've called someone or I've done like a cold message on LinkedIn to say, do you fancy coming on the pod or whatever? and then people come back and say, oh, hey, Charles, I know so-and-so who's been on your pod, or I know so-and-so that you've worked with. I know so because of your content. It's just you're building trust in the background. That's kind of my thing. Like you can do two types of posts, but I like the idea of just long-term, just having your name out there and getting that recognition.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And people like those personal angles. So in the team, we encourage people to do posting about jobs because that's their advertising of an opportunity. But say, please don't just post about jobs because that's very transactional. So make sure you're sharing industry insights and thought leadership to the extent that they are thought leadership posts, because they're more kind of like tactical information people, job seekers could use or hiring managers could use. And also, personal stuff that you think is going to be interesting to LinkedIn. And it doesn't have to be about like being competitive, but we have lots of examples of people in sports, cycling, running, whatever it may be, and they're just showing that bit of personality. For me, it's camper vans and Glastonbury. And people have also talked about the challenges that they have, and that brings it down to that personal level as well. But it works as an opener. People want to talk to you about it. They feel like they know you on a personal level. So when you're doing business development, again, you're not this like faceless voice on the end of the phone. You're not this faceless person dropping them the value add PDF that you have constructed about the challenges that their industry are having. They kind of know who you are a bit. So that really helps. A couple of tips, since we're like just short on time. Track it. So understand so how many followers you have in your network from your ICP. And you can measure that monthly or quarterly. It's easy to do. You can just go and have a look at the different, you can just enter the different names of the personas into your followship and understand who's actually following you. So are the messages resonating? Are you building an audience in that direction? Because obviously you want to put out the information to people who it's going to be relevant to.
Yeah.
And you can then see how many people you're doing it to, and you can use it as a business development tool. When you engage with me, Mr. Client, you're then going to have access to my 20,000 followers. Measure the posts. So on the LinkedIn functionality, you can go back and see where you got the most engagement. So in the last 90 days, what's been my top performing post? Why? Try and think, what was it about that? And maybe it'll turn out to be one of the personal ones. So there you go. They're not a waste of time. But that will help guide you in what to put out next. But I think that they're the kind of like that's the kind of like basics of, what we do internally. And the team are very committed to it. That is a big part of it. They sit down with one another without me, spitballing ideas of like what could be interesting to the demographic that we're trying to market to.
Yeah, nice. That's really, really good tips. It's interesting you say that. The two big like best posts that I've done recently was one about finally buying an outdoor table set on my new patio. Blew up. Fine. Another one saying to people that you should do 10 before 10 and try and keep in touch with hiring managers and people. And people just called me ancient for it because apparently 10 before 10 is hustle culture and toxic. Cool. Anyway,
I do believe in 10 before 10. Just from a more getting into the beginning of your day, you've got some intentions to make some calls, because the day can run away with you.
Unrealistic, Elaine. It's unrealistic. You can't speak to 10 decision makers every morning. Apparently, that's what I got told. Anyway, look, I'm conscious of time. Look, I've really enjoyed this, Elaine. Thank you so much again for coming on. Last question I always finish off with every episode. Following this particular episode, how can people get 1% better in recruitment?
Okay, so one thing that I always used to do at the end of the day was like write in a diary, about like what happened that day, or like memories. And then I thought about improving as a person. This could be like as a professional, but also in recruitment. Instead of doing that, I flipped that to actually like writing down my learns for the day. And it would be very, like, what did I learn today? Not just in a like, what are my top 3 learns for the day? I'd be like, what's been my like human experience as a person today? Whether it be in relationships, whether it be something at work, and actually like take that lesson into the next day and use it as something that you like read back on, and you can start to see your personal progress. And obviously you could focus it around your progress at work, but also your progress as a person. Really useful tool, more in depth than you expect it to be. And I think it allows you to then, grow and improve.
Love that. Do you do that like handwriting, or do you do it like on a you do it handwriting, do you?
Yeah, I like handwriting for the kind of impact it has on my brain as opposed to typing. So yeah, that would be what would help me learn the best.
Yeah, nice, love it. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time. Really, really liked having you on. In terms of how people can reach out to you and what types of people, so if people listen to this, who should reach out to you and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn. Anyone can reach out to me, and I'll, happily connect and have a conversation. But obviously very keen to speak to other recruiters in the industry, advice, guidance, ideas. and people within the technology industry as well.
Wonderful. Cool. Thank you very much. And for everyone that's got this far, thank you very much for listening, watching, and see you next week. Thank you so much for watching this episode or listening to this episode, guys. Let me know, what was your biggest takeaway from this week's guest? What did you think about their answer to the 1% Better in Recruitment? I'm really keen to hear your thoughts. If you haven't already, please drop us a like if you're on YouTube, follow on Apple and Spotify, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm really, really keen to get some feedback from you all on what you think about the format of these episodes. Are there any other guests that you think we should have on the show? Are you someone that wants to be a guest on the 1% Better Recruitment podcast? Because if so, you can just simply DM me on LinkedIn, you can drop me an email, all my details are below on these videos. And I'm always interested in having absolute legends come on the show that want to have real open conversation, that want to talk about things that could even be potentially controversial. We could debate certain things, but the whole point, as I mentioned at the start of the video, guys, is that my whole purpose with this show is to help the recruitment industry get 1% better after every episode. So make sure you're following, subscribing on all the different platforms, and I'll see you next week.